Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 10, the household as a cooperative conflicting unit, we are going to start our lecture with the topic the socio-economic dynamics of the household. The third principle bargaining draws upon non-cooperative game theory. The advantage to the household member when they pool their resources. Hodinot says are jeopardized when any member implicitly threatens to go for an outside option, that is an economic opportunity that is available outside of the family pooling arrangement. That forms a bargaining level for laying claim to a greater share of a household's food resources. This empirical problem of perception and communication is indeed important. On the other hand, it is far from obvious that the right conclusion to draw from this is the non-viability of the notion of the personal welfare. There are considerable variations in the perception of individuality even within such a traditional society. And here the lack of perception of personal welfare is neither immutable nor particularly resistant to social development. Indeed, the process of politicization, including a political recognition of the gender issue, can itself bring about the sharp changes in these perceptions. The systematically inferior position of women inside and outside the household in many societies points to the necessity of treating gender as a force of its own in development analysis. The economic hardship of women-headed household is a problem both of female deprivation and of family poverty. Furthermore, female and male in the same family may well have quite divergent predicaments, and this can make a position of women in the poorer family particularly precarious. To concentrate on family poverty irrespective of gender can be misleading in terms of both causation and consequences. The fact that the relative deprivation of women and men is of no means uniform across the world does not reduce the importance of the gender as a parameter of analysis. This variability is an important reason for giving serious attention to the causal antecedents of contrasting deprivations. To take an extremely simple and crude example, it is clear that despite the evident biological advantages that women seem to have over the men in survival and longevity, there is nevertheless a remarkable preponderance of surviving men over surviving women in the population of less developed countries taken as a whole, in sharp contrast with the position of the more developed countries, whereas there are about 106 women per 100 men in Europe and North America. There are only 97 women per 100 men in the developing country as a whole. Since mortality and survival are not independent of the care and neglect and are influenced by social action and public policy, even this extremely crude perspective cannot fail to isolate gender as an important parameter in development studies. It is, however, difficult to translate this elementary recognition into practice and to find an adequate framework for the use of gender categories and sex specific information in social analysis. Sen asserts that the problem is far too complex and basic to be resolved by any kind of simple model, but one could go some distance towards a better understanding of the problem by broadening the conceptual structure and the informational base of gender analysis in economic and social relations. He thus extends the income and the distribution of resources within the household to incorporate the following elements in his analysis. Now let us move to the next point. Capabilities, well-beings, agency and perception. Sen examines different theories of household economics such as standard models of household production, family allocations or equivalence scales in capturing the coexistence of extensive conflicts and pervasive cooperation in household arrangements. But these do have an inadequate informational base and are particularly negligent of the influence of perceived interest and perceived contributions. In this light, not only are capabilities, well-beings and agency important, but so is perception regarding these qualities and such other attributes. An alternative approach to the cooperative conflict is then sketched, identifying certain qualitative relation in the form of directional responses of the outcome to certain determining variables in the informational base. These relations are translated into a format of extended entitlements based on the sharpening the concept of entitlements by incorporating notion of perceived legitimacy in intra-household divisions. Each person has several identities. Being a man or a woman is one of them. Being a member of a family is another. Our understanding of our interests, obligations, objectives, and legitimate behavior is influenced by the various and sometimes conflicting effects of these diverse identities. In some contexts, the family identity may exert such a strong influence on our perception that we may not find it easy to formulate any clear notion of our own individual welfare. Based on empirical observations of the family-centered perception in some traditional societies such as India, some authors have disputed the viability of the notion of personal welfare in those societies. It has often been observed that if a typical Indian rural woman was asked about her personal welfare, she would find the question unintelligible, as if she was able to reply, she might answer the question in terms of her reading of the welfare of her family. The idea of personal welfare may not be viable in such a context. This happened not only with women but also with men also. This was observed during the fieldwork among the elderly in Rajasthan. Neither men nor women found meaningful and relevant the question on income and having a room for oneself. The nearest they could go to was personal expenses on items no one else in the house consumed. For example, tobacco, snuff, and opium, etc. Insofar as intra-family divisions involved significant inequalities in the allotment of food, medical attention, health care, and the like. The lack of perception of personal interest combined with a great concern for family welfare is, of course, just the kind of attitude that helps to sustain the traditional inequalities. History bears evidence to the fact that acute inequalities often survive precisely by making allies out of the deprived. The underdog comes to accept the legitimacy of the unequal order and becomes an implicit accomplice. It can be a serious error to take the absence of the consciousness of that inequality as evidence of the absence of that inequality. Sen argues we can go back to the example given earlier from the fieldwork experience with the elderly. Not only the women but even the men found questions of the personal or individual income and room absurd. These men were by no means the underdog in their families, nor were the elderly women. Perception is based both on facts and on cultural notions, connotations, and values about these facts, thereby making the study of the deprivation and interest of family members a complex one. She further states that personal interest and welfare are not just a matter of perception. These are objective aspects of these concepts that command attention even when the corresponding self-perception does not exist. For example, the ill-fare associated with morbidity or the undernourishment has an immediacy that does not await the person's inclination or willingness to answer detailed questions regarding his or her welfare. Indeed, the well-being of the person may possibly be seen in terms of the person's functioning and capabilities, what he or she is able to do or be. It is here that the sense economy comes back rather strongly. He argues for the individualism, and this is in accordance with Western liberal thought in the utilitarian tradition. It is also possible to distinguish between a person's well-being and agency. A person may have various goals and objectives other than the pursuit of his or her well-being. Though there are obvious links between a person's well-being and the fulfillment of his or her other objectives, the overall success of an agent may not be closely connected and certainly may not be identified with the person's own well-being. It is the agency aspect that is most influenced by a person's sense of obligation and perception of legitimate behavior. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.